What's going on, Summoners? My name is Tia, and today we're going over something that you've probably noticed has been bothering a lot of players for a while. We all have some mixed feelings about Riot and their approach to champion design. The truth is that out of the last 20 champions released, only 2 haven't been humans, or at least human-animal hybrids. So what's the deal? Are monster champions like Cho'Gath and Rek'Sai not cool enough for the player base? I think it's time we take a deeper look at Riot's champion design philosophy, starting off with Gwen, the newest champion that's confirmed to arrive sometime during patch 11.8. Let's jump right in. If you haven't seen our recent videos, Gwen the Harrowed Seamstress is Riot's next champion, and there's a bit of controversy around her character design. I want to clarify that most of the community seems to be interested in her gameplay, but her model itself fell kind of flat. Sure, she has an awesome voiceover and captures the feeling of a living doll, but why not just make her a living doll? Riot's initial response to this feedback was that Gwen isn't meant to be a living doll. She's actually a doll that has been turned into a human, which sounds more like a technicality than an explanation. When clarifying this response, Riot Reeve said she's not meant to be a living doll. She's a doll that has been transformed into a human, similar to Pinocchio. We had early versions where she was more of a living doll, but it felt too similar to Oriana and even more so to Shaco. So there you have it. Gwen is a human, and while that answers our questions about why she doesn't have patches of thread on her skin, it doesn't really satisfy anyone. The League community was basically told, yeah, Gwen is a human champion. She's meant to be a human. She acts a bit weird, but she's still a human. And this is where Riot's design philosophy starts to bother some players. Gwen has the perfect setup to being a living, breathing doll. Sure, Shaco is literally an evil marionette, but who cares about Shaco's lore? Gwen is new. She's a fresh face in Runeterra. Her animations and character model look amazing, especially when compared to Shaco. If anything, Riot could have rewrote Shaco's backstory during Gwen's development. I don't know if it's just me, but I'm a bit bummed that new champions are being held back by outdated and boring lore from older champions. Speaking of new champions, you can find the best coaching for any champion if you head over to our website at ProGuides.com. If you're like me and pick your main based on their strength in the meta, you might be learning a new champion every few months. Our challenger coaches and analysts will help you solve any problems you bring up, and they'll definitely teach you about the right concepts to focus on. With that said, let's get back to the video. Okay, so Riot kind of dropped the ball from the community with Gwen's champion design. I don't think anyone would be upset if this was something new for Riot, but if we look at the most recent champion releases, there's a bit more to worry about. The last 5 releases before Gwen were Viego, Rell, Seraphine, Samira, and Yone. All of these champions are humans in one way or another. They all look pretty amazing, but their fundamental design is pretty uninspiring. The last non-human champion was Yuumi back in May of 2019. Before that, it was Ornn in August of 2017. As someone who loves to play League for how competitive the game can be, I never really thought about things like champion design. But even I can tell that every champion has a perfect face and body. Cough, Yone, cough. While it may not seem like this affects the gameplay of League, there's a lot that goes into creating a champion, including the balance between appearance and gameplay. And that brings me to our question of the day. If you could design one champion, what kind of champion would you make? I'm talking humans, non-humans, flying whales from the void, literally anything. Let us know down in the comments, and honestly, I can't wait to see what you guys come up with, and I'm probably gonna screenshot the best one and put it on my Instagram. Alright, so I know what you guys are thinking. What do you mean champion design and gameplay work together? Let's look at Gwen as an example, using the blog post that Riot released talking about her design. Champions always have a bunch of different abilities tested before the developers choose the final 4. One interesting ability that Gwen used to have was a thrown thread that would tether 2 enemies if they were next to each other. This ability would give Gwen some powerful hard CC, so it makes sense that Riot opted out of it. But a more doll like Gwen might have used this ability. If Gwen was covered in stitches and had a button for an eye, wouldn't it make sense for her to use her loose thread to tie up her enemies? If Gwen was decaying and falling apart from years of neglect as a doll, she would have used all the tools she had to defeat her enemies. But the Gwen that we get is a totally different Gwen. She's a human, and humans generally use weapons to fight. Her scissors are the central focus of Gwen, including her design, her lore, and her gameplay. So to recap, the champion that we get from Riot is always a different version of that champion. I'm positive that there's a scary living doll version of Gwen, we just didn't get her. This This works for any champion made over the past couple of years, and it makes sense the more you think about it. We're always getting developer blogs about recent champions, and older designs always have alternative weapons, armor, and more. Sometimes the only thing that stays the same is the weapon. Champion design is a process that doesn't have an exact start or end. And that's exactly why it's important for future champions to have unique designs. We need a balance of simpler champions like Lilia and complex champions like Aphelios, and creatures are a great way to introduce some crazy mechanics to the league. So why is it hard to make a creature champion that's super popular? Well, the answer isn't really obvious. When you see a champion in League, you immediately make a bunch of assumptions about their playstyle based on their appearance. I do it too. Zed looks like a shadow ninja. Yasuo looks like he could slice the wind. What's the first thing that comes to mind when you see Rek'Sai? It's kind of hard to say without a bias, but someone who doesn't play League would think Rek'Sai is a straight up monster. Does she bite you? Does she yell at you? Yeah, she does. But so does every single monster in any game. It's a lot harder to give non-humanoid champions a special place in League without giving them something really interesting. Cho'Gath devours his enemies. Vel'Koz shoots people with his laser beams, and Kha'Zix is a giant bug. These are some pretty cool monsters, and each of them have mechanics that work with their appearance. The bottom line of designing a monster champion is that you probably need to hammer out the gameplay before you even design the champion. You can't just change the weapon that Cho'Gath is using. His body is his weapon. And that's the case for almost every monster champion, so it's a lot harder to create them. Imagine if you saw the splash art for a new champion and they had huge horns, only to find out that the champion actually never headbutts anyone. I don't know about you, but I would be pretty bummed. Okay, so it might be a bit harder to design non-humanoid champions, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't happen. I don't think there's a good excuse for Riot and their endless array of champions that look perfect, especially when you have games like Dota, which has a huge range of different champion designs. And Dota 2 isn't the only game with awesome creatures. Heroes of the Storm is another example of a game with characters that define a playstyle with their appearance. Okay, let's be honest, I never want to see a Deathwing walking around in my League game, but it shows the possibilities. Speaking of possibilities, looking at other games makes the creatures in League look pretty lame sometimes. The closest thing we have to a huge champion is Cho'Gath, and he's probably one of Riot's best designed creatures. League obviously focuses more on balance and competitive play, but the creatures still leave something to be desired. Lucky for us, we actually got a lot of clarification from Riot regarding the future of champion design in League. Before we even talk about the future, let's hammer out Riot's concrete definitions for humans, humanoids, and creatures. Humans, champions that entirely resemble a human. Some examples are Lux and Sejuani. If you could easily cosplay them, they're probably a human. Humanoids, champions that resemble humans with some different features. Some examples are Renekton, Urgot, and Aatrox. This is a pretty big gray space since some players wouldn't consider Renekton or Urgot a humanoid. The most important thing about humanoids is that they in some way resemble humans. For example, Renekton used to be a human and he's basically a giant human crocodile combo. Creatures, champions that don't resemble humans at all. Some examples are Yuumi and Rek'Sai. These champions are very clearly not human and you can usually tell pretty quickly. Now that we know how Riot classifies champions, let's talk about the future of champion design. We should expect to see less pure humans like Lux, while seeing more humanoids and creatures. The most important thing to note here is the changes won't be noticeable until 2022. As shown earlier in the year, the only non-human champion this year will be a humanoid, most likely a Yordle. We also shouldn't expect a creature every year. Luckily, we're on schedule to get a creature in 2022, but that doesn't mean it'll be a common thing. Riot made it pretty clear that moving forward we'll start to see less humans, not more creatures. This is pretty much a way of saying that we'll be getting a lot more humanoid champions over the next few years. On top of that, we got a couple more things to mention. Reworks will not count as new champions, so don't worry about missing out on a new creature for a rework. Riot acknowledged that they know Yuumi and Rek'Sai are for totally different audiences, but they're still creatures. It's also true that creatures just aren't as popular as humanoid champions, so it doesn't make sense to design a bunch of them. Speaking of popularity, Riot said that they're happy with the overall reception to Viego. Even though he looks pretty standard, his impact in the lore and presence in the game makes the Ruin King an awesome addition to the League roster. Riot expects Gwen to be a decently popular champion herself, somewhere close to the popularity of Fiora. So we've pretty much talked about everything regarding Riot and their champion designs. But why does it even matter? Well, if you're someone who cares about lore and champion design, you don't really need an explanation. But for you guys out there who couldn't care less about what their champion looks like, remember that unique champion designs might bring in new gameplay. How boring would it be if Riot released another creature with the same boring kit as Cho'Gath? If the next champion, however, is an octopus, imagine what kind of mechanics they'll bring into League. Human champions can bring new mechanics too, but creatures almost always add something totally fresh to the game. I'm personally really excited for the future creatures that will come to League, and hopefully they will bring something brand new to the game. AKA octopuses, or octopi, whatever. Sounds cool. At the end of the day, Riot's gonna do what they gonna do. Obviously, there's reasons why they're releasing the kind of champions they have been, even if it means we miss out on cool unique designs like Bard and Aurelion Sol. But anyway, we hope you all enjoyed this style of video, and let us know in the comments down below if there's more stuff that you want to hear us talk about like this. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for good luck in your games, and I'll see you next time. Go follow me on IG and then we can talk about video games because I've been DMing all of you guys back. Yeah, bye.